This is my vintage Smurf collection, and one of these is a custom I made from scratch. Can you tell which one? It's this guy. Hit my music. Last video I showed you my Swamp Thing 3¾ inch action figure I made from scratch. He's still a work in progress. But then I got sidetracked. I was making a Raiders of the Temple of Doom Indiana Jones figure, and he's a little less further along. But there's a couple other projects I had that I didn't even get. I damn near completed, and I kind of abandoned. And before I get further on these guys, I kind of want to go back and finish one really quick. And that was my Smurf figure, which I have teased in earlier videos. I started this figure maybe 2 years ago. This was probably the second project I started after Venom. I thought this was going to be quick, and it wasn't, because I was constantly dissatisfied and I couldn't get it to look like what was in my head, and didn't know exactly what I was even going for, other than I wanted to look like a real production, old school Smurf from the 70s and 80s. I would start other projects, pick this one back up here and there, but he was always left off to the side, and I would get a little further along with him every so often. But now that I started some other projects, I kind of wanted to go back and finish him because something felt incomplete with me. I spent the last week really just going for it, doing all the stuff I was afraid to tackle, like his smile and his belt line. Two things I was agonizing over, and his earlobes. I just went for it, did it, didn't care if it was going to come out as a fail or not. I was like, I want to finish him. And I did it pretty quick. For me, a week on a figure is like minuscule. I spend months sculpting stuff. I'm not that prolific. What he's made out of is, made out of wire, art wire, and Apoxie Sculpt and epoxy clay. The bottom layers are Apoxie Sculpt, and top stuff I was doing some details with because I ran out was epoxy clay. The difference to me, what I remember with the Apoxie Sculpt, because I haven't actually used it in a long time, it dried a lot harder. I can usually chisel away with an X-Acto knife a lot easier with the epoxy clay, but this stuff was kind of hard to go back and work. That was the main thing that I did not know what to do, how to finish this figures, because the bottom was made out of Apoxie Sculpt. I did not know how to do the mouth line, I did not know how to do the belt line and the ears, and I just let it sit for a long time before getting back to it. I had to build my sculpting confidence. He still looks a little rough around the edges, not totally smooth. Before I start painting him tomorrow, I'm going to give him another quick once over with some more fine sandpaper. But a lot of the rougher edges will probably be covered up when I start putting paint on them. Heavier the paint covers it, it gets very forgiving. Sometimes you put too much on, you're going to lose some detail. Like this was a happy little accident right here. This looks like wrinkles in his hat. Didn't want to lose it. I tried replicating that on this side. I couldn't do that for the life of me. His ears, that took a lot of research, what kind of ear I wanted to do, and I ended up kind of doing my own artistic interpretation of it. I really sat down and studied all of these Smurfs that I had to take, like every artistic cue I could to make this, my Smurf, look as close as possible as something that would come out factory from one of these. Like whoever sculpted this. Looks like the same guy probably sculpted most of these except for the early ones. The early ones were a lot smaller and looked a lot less like the cartoon, where these look more like the 80s cartoon Smurfs that we all know. Even though the comic book, the French comic book, looked a lot like the cartoon. So this is basically your, I would call him the army builder Smurf. He's just the plainest Smurf that there is. He's got no weird cowboy hat, or he's not hiking, he's not eating ice cream, he's not drinking beer, he's not stealing a cookie, he's not crying. This is just a basic, regular Smurf, and I just wanted to sculpt something like that. I wanted to make him more like the later style. And that was my kind of inspiration. Here's some artistic cues I had to look up, like how am I going to do the ear? Later ear, a detail. Early ear is just an indent. I want to do something kind of in between. Even getting the pose. Basically I used that as an inspiration, but how squatty his knees are, how far his butt sticks out, how big his head is, shape of the hat. This went through, I debated every single line on this figure, even down to his smile. I drew that on with a pencil probably 20 different times. And then I just kind of winged it at the end with a screwdriver to get that line right there. And the belt line too. Do I just paint his pants and the top of them, or am I going to do a cut? So I had to go back and look at every single Smurf. He's got a faint line there. That's what I had to think of. Every single line on this was debated. This is the hardest sculpt I did, and you saw the other stuff I did. There was not even half as much debate going on with all of that. This I wanted to get dead perfect, and I think my sculpt so far is. This is about 93% of what was in my head, which is further than I've taken any other sculpt I did. Some stuff I'm a little unhappy with, how thick his neck is. That's because the little wire frame I put inside of him, it was a little too thick. So I had to kind of work around it. You can see part of it sanded through. You can see that. But luckily that wire is, you can cut into it. You can make dents into it. You can, once it's all compact like that. If you've seen any of my other sculptures, I'm big on studying. They're all based on something, like an existing toy line. And I do extensive research on the sculpting styles, the artistic choices that they made. And I try and replicate that. And this is no different than that at all. I did Toy Biz style Marvel superhero figures. I did LJN Bendy's WWF figure. Working on Kennerstyle action figures. And this one was straight up Schleich 1970s, 1980s Smurfs. Alright, it took me about a month, and I'm not a great painter, but boom, here he is. He is done. Look at that, look at that, look at that. That's awesome. Here he is compared to some real Smurfs, and I think I got the color just right. The happy median. A lot of them aren't the same exact color, probably due to age and, you know, what factory that they came out of, but they were all definitely hand painted. So here's another one. They're all slightly different shades. So I tried to come up with a shade. I had to mix the paint in order to get a shade I was kind of happy with. And here is my mix. Here's all my paints I used. I think I got these these deltas. Where did I get that? I think I got them at Target. And the apple barrel stuff got at Walmart. I just have a ton of it. And especially my Can't Live Without It Tamiya flat clear. And the white is nothing but spray paint. And after I sanded them down pretty good, the spray paint came out like nice and glossy and flat like that. Covered up a lot of my sanding mistakes and imperfections underneath with the sculpt, so it hit a lot. Then I painted the blue on top, the acrylic, and I put the gloss, it was a flat gloss, on top of that to make it look like it was painted on top of plastic, which I think I replicated pretty good. Use this guy, he's more color coordinated. The eyes, they could be a little bit crisper. I don't know, if I get a little bit more experience, I'll go back and fix it. But as far as the flat, it was too flat. So I would just take it and wipe it on my sleeve until it got a little bit of gloss on there. Tried to match gloss as close as I could to a figure. He's a little bit flatter, he's a little bit shinier. Try to do it somewhere in the middle. And for the finer details, I used this very toothpick for, you know, lining up his belly. When I used a smaller brush, it just kind of dragged and would leave like little imperfections along. But although the real ones were hand painted too, their lines aren't super crisp. I just liked the toothpick better, and I tried to do the eyes like that. It's probably why they're not as super crisp. But man, am I proud of this sucker. Oh my god. And as far as mixing the paint, I didn't think I was even going to be able to get a shade close. I bought this one, and then when I got it home, I realized it wasn't even that close. But I mixed all these paints, and it only took me about 2 minutes to whip up a color that I liked. And then I ran out halfway through because I repainted him because I thought I put it on too thick. I was like, all right, I put thinner on him, took it all off, did it again, and started painting him. Then I ran out of my paint, had to mix it up again, and somehow I got the same exact shade I wanted again, 2 times in a row. And it didn't even take that long. I'm getting to be really good at this stuff. There he is. Let's look at him compared with all my other custom figures. Alright, if you've been following this, that was my first figure, Venom, made from a dollar store figure. I sculpted on top of it with a Apoxie Sculpt or clay. I did Punisher, same also with a dollar store figure. And the only thing, I didn't sculpt that face. I used the original dollar store figure's face and sculpted everything else on top. Big jump in quality from there. I couldn't even do Venom's symbol. But I did manage to do Punisher symbol really good. Then we went to an LJN style bendy figure of Superstar Billy Graham. First figure done completely from scratch, also Apoxie Sculpt. And then we get the Smurf. And you know the Smurf was a side quest because I started a couple of other figures. And I don't feel like I needed to go back and finish him before I finished those figures. I think that tells my sculpting story of where I'm at. Here's the other figures I was working on. You saw from the beginning of the video, here's Swamp Thing, and he's a lot better than he was in the beginning of the video. And here's the Indiana Jones figure, based on this, but I want a Temple of Doom outfit. And there's more I needed to learn sculpting and painting wise before I could finish that, so we had to go back to Smurf. We had to finish him off. He's been sitting around for almost 2 years, so now that I completed him, I feel like I can complete these guys. Woo. These have not been easy. This is like me at my full powers. I'm probably going to finish Swamp Thing first. And I'm working on his moss. I'm working on the finer details. And Indiana Jones. He looks like he's pretty far along, but I gotta work on his hands because I'm also sculpting his weapons. I made a machete and I gotta do a gun and a whole bunch of other stuff. So he's gotta come in closer into focus. Especially that face. Swamp Thing's face looks freaking awesome. That's where I'm at. Oh, and a little other side quest. I did Batman's head. Not super crisp. Not super crisp yet, but it's getting there. With a paint job, that would look fantastic. And here's another one. Did Wolverine's head just for fun. I don't know what kind of figure I would do. This is kind of like a Toy Biz style. Why do I copy old action figure lines like that, like this, and then doing a Kennerstyle? Because I don't know, it makes me feel like closer to the toy line. Like making your own from scratch. It's more than I feel more satisfied than I did working on these guys, where it was just me sculpting on top of something. No, this I did it all the way from the beginning. And I got more control over what I want to do, even though that control is a tremendous amount of more work. But I am very proud of these dudes, so thanks for watching. I got more coming up. Swamp Thing's probably going to be finished next. Give him another 2 months. Indiana Jones, I don't know. Say I have one good week off or something like that. He might come along even further. But like, subscribe, share, all that.